I'm Sarah Sharp. I'm a deal attorney who helps people buy and sell businesses every day. And there are a couple of things you're probably missing in your letter of intent, especially in my field where I help people buy and sell accounting practices. All day long, a lot of sellers are comparing lots and lots of letters of intent because there's many offers out there and it's a super hot space to buy or sell a business in. When you are comparing your letters of intent, it's very easy to focus on the top line, which is the top line purchase price. And people will compare, thinking it's apples to apples, they'll compare the top line purchase price from one deal to the next and decide which one's highest and they go with that, right? There's so much more to the purchase price than that top line. Usually it's made up of a couple buckets. If you're in private equity land, you're probably looking at some rollover equity, which I will come back to, but there's a lot of different ways that you have to value rollover equity. But even if you're just looking at a pretty simple buyout, what I see all the time is really small. In one of the paragraphs of the letter of intent, it will say closing cash payment to be reduced by a normalized working capital amount. What is that? That can be a really, really big difference, especially if you're in a smaller business, like let's say a $3 million business. And let's say that, you spend several million a year on your overhead. Well, divide that by 12, multiply that by 3, and that's usually what people are wanting to get by normalized working capital. So that whole closing cash payment that they're promising is actually a fake number that's going to be reduced by several $100,000. Very common to see that, but it's equally as common to see somebody who doesn't want to reduce the purchase price or the closing cash payment by working capital. So if you see an offer for $2.5 million that doesn't want to reduce by working capital, that very much could be the same as an offer where the top line is $3 million. So that is one big thing to look at when you're selling and you're comparing multiple letters of intent. The other thing is, like I mentioned earlier, rollover equity. We are in a space where there's a lot of people buying and selling and a lot of private equity groups entering the space. And with the advent of private equity groups, all of a sudden people started to offer rollover equity. In my space with accountants, there's a pretty significant distrust of rollover equity. And that's for good reason, because ultimately rollover equity is kind of nebulous and it's very hard for accountants to get their mind around what it means. And if you are comparing multiple letters of intent, you might miss that rollover equity isn't the same in all of them. So even if you're comparing one deal that values rollover equity $1 and you compare it $1 to $1, there are a lot of differences. For instance, how did they come to that value, right? So if a company is buying you out, private equity group, and they say that the rollover equity is worth, let's say $1 million, how did they determine that? And that's an okay thing to ask. You can ask that. You can ask buyers where they got their money and what kind of approvals they need to be able to close the deal. You can ask all kinds of things. So ask, how'd you value your rollover equity? But even if, they use the exact same valuation metric to establish the rollover equity that they're giving you as part of your purchase price, it makes a big difference as to what entity that equity is in. So sometimes people give you rollover equity in the new company that they're setting up to house the assets that they're buying of yours as a brand new company. And it might have some value. It might have significant value. I mean, obviously you're selling it for significant value, right? So that's something. It's certainly a good thing. But if you are comparing that to rollover equity in a parent company, and a parent company is a company like at the top of the chain of the private equity group where maybe they have acquired multiple little entities underneath it and they're offering rollover equity in the parent company, that could be of a lot greater value. Depending, right? But just because it's scary and intimidating doesn't mean you shouldn't ask questions and dig in. It's important that you understand it. And nobody is born knowing anything about rollover equity. So ask a lot of questions. And I have had probably every single seller say, I would so much rather have a seller promissory note than a grant of rollover equity. And the buyers can't believe that because it's this phenomenal opportunity to be on the ground floor of a really cool investment. One of the reasons that I think sellers should seriously consider offers that have rollover equity is because at the end of the day, when you get several $1 million when you're closing your deal, you're going to have to turn around and figure out what to invest that in. And if you're like a lot of us, you've got a lot of money in the stock market, you don't really need more of that. Real estate, is down and not really probably what you're looking to spend your retirement doing. And so what are you going to invest in? You have this great opportunity to invest in this kind of closely held company that is something you really, really, really intimately understand and can monitor. I very rarely see a roll up, which means people buying lots of little accounting practices. not sell for a profit. Because what they're doing is they're taking, something that trades at a certain lower EBITDA because it's small. They're adding a bunch of them together and they're selling them at the higher EBITDA that a bigger company warrants. That's a no-brainer. So, rollover equity can be really, really, really valuable. But it depends. Another thing to consider when you're comparing one letter of intent to the next is, where are you in the life cycle of that? Because if you are getting a rollover equity that's worth $1 per share the minute before they do that big call liquidation event where they sell, then you're not going to get that much upside, right? I mean, you're going to get your money. You're going to get $1 per share, probably with a lot of restrictions related to like rolling over into the new company and things like that. And so not as good as if you are more on the ground floor of a company where all of a sudden you've got the ability to get that $1 a share and see them acquire 20 more practices and sell for way, way, way higher than $1 per share. But any new company also comes with more risk. So how do you compare those to each other? And for these reasons, a lot of people kind of overlook rollover equity and pretend like it's nothing, which I think is a mistake. So do not, when you're comparing one letter of intent to the next, do not overlook rollover equity. Don't sleep on it. It's a phenomenal opportunity. Perhaps even consider choosing a buyer that has best rollover equity upside for you, because you will absolutely have the ability to turn that $2 million of rollover equity into $7 million of rollover equity. And that is the thing they call the second bite of the apple. And it's pretty magical. So, if you're considering selling, there's a lot more to meets the eye than in your LOIs than just the top line purchase price. It really matters what they're made of. I'm Sarah Sharp. I'm a deal attorney who helps people buy and sell businesses every day. If you found this valuable, please subscribe, go check out dealacademy.org, where I have courses that talk about buying and selling businesses, primarily accounting practices.